Mayor, that is Jolide Matongo, killed in car crash. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has said that given tribute to the new mayor of Johannesburg following his death in a car crash, aged 46. Jolide Matonga had been campaigning with Mr. Ramaphosa before the accident. His vehicle collided with a van while trying to avoid the pedestrians who had run on the road, local media came to report. Now the pedestrians and the other vehicle's driver also died, while Mr. Matongo's two bodyguards are being treated in hospital for injuries. Mr. Matongo only became mayor 10th August following the death of his predecessor from COVID-19 complications. The local media reported that also these Zimbabwean migrants had been a political activist in South Africa since the age of 13.
Well, from science, we look at running out of time. The UN report shows Earth is on a catastrophic global warming path. Now, the planet is heading towards warming of 2.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by the end of this century, as per UN report. Now, the UN Secretary General Guterres stated that the planet's current path is catastrophic. According to the scientists, global temperatures should remain less than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels in order to prevent the worst of the climate crisis. Now, the current situation shows that the planet needs to be reducing its emissions by 45% by 2030 to reach the carbon neutrality by the middle of the century, scientists have said. As per current situation, emissions commitments from countries, there will be a 16% increase in emissions in 2030 when compared to the 2010 level. Now, this will lead to warming of 2.7 degrees above pre-industrial levels by the end of this century, according to the report. Now, an August report stated that the global temperatures have already reached 1.2 degrees of warming. The real-life consequences of this have manifested themselves while Western USA and Southern Europe were battling the wildfires this summer. China and Germany witnessing devastating floods. Wow, still more floods.
I know, but we're going to be talking about more of those in the weather, nature and climate today. What else do you have for us today?
We want to look more on what is happening across eastern Uganda. We did see landslides towards the weekend from the heavy rains. We want to see a look at that, how the rains are performing. Is it even related to the climate change that we are talking about?
All right, Felix Nkunda, we do have the news reel in the next hour. What are we going to be discussing?
Of course, we will dive into causing evaluation in how far the opposition has come in terms of its formidable leadership, probably under the stewardship of also the new opposition leader, that is the Honorable Matthias Mpuga, but also taking an account in the tentative mandate of it entirely in national building.
That is true. And Robert Rabel, today we do have Good Morning Uganda agenda. What do we have today?
Well, today we are going to be more into the education sector, the short curriculum, and the efforts aimed at ensuring either schools reopen as soon as possible, or if they are to take longer, how is continuity of learning being handled from the ministry's perspective?
Okay, all right. In the world of sports, Sunday yesterday was a big day for two clubs on the Ugandan scene, Express FC and URA, that finished their second legs of preliminary rounds in CAF Champions League and CAF Confederation Cup respectively. Ruben Pima Chibidango will be here to give you an update in that regard, as many other stories regarding sports. But for our poll question this morning, we want to know, in your view, how can opposition get involved more in the country's socio-economic development? How can opposition get more involved in the country's social and economical development? The WhatsApp number is on your screen. We are waiting to hear from you as we step into a 7 o'clock hour. For now, we'll leave you with the song for the day.
Live from Now Avenue in UBC Studios, this is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. 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 Live from UBC Studios in Kampala.
Of course, when you talk about the opposition, most of the times if you want to cause a grammatical direct interpretation, it will seem like you're talking about an opposing force in terms of government ideology and agenda. And sometimes it has been mistaken by most of the politicians, by the way, if you're keen to note. However, the baseline, or what you want to call the history or backbone of the opposition in terms of political lineage, comes or springs from the inception of a multi-party dispensation or type of politicking, where we must take true cognizance of the fact that if we are to acknowledge the existence of democracy, it's only fair for us to acknowledge that there is also a normative of divergency. And divergency, for that matter, would then mean that it is allowed for you to think the way you want to think, or believe the way you want to believe, or also subscribe to whatever you would want to subscribe to, in as much as it should be okay for me to diverge differently. So that's the springeth of the normative of how we get to, or how we get to have the opposition in parliament. It just springs from the fact that there is room for us to disagree on matters of governance, of matters of constitutional implementation, just to mention but a few. So with that sort of background, then you will understand that where there is divergency in terms of opinion related to policy, governance, implementation of law, a vision, and many others in terms of where a country should be, that means that there is a party that is meant to deliver the expectation. Now, the expectation again must be a subscription of what we call a general vision or a majority vision. That's why the majority vision then will come to life in terms of, for example, in Uganda, who is elected, who has gotten much votes, let's say. Most recently, if I'm using Uganda as an example, is the president of Uganda. So their vision becomes a majority vision. Now, it is their duty to implement it. Now, because of the existence of divergency and later on the multi-party politicking, that gives room to a different sect, or what we want to call the minority vision, to be able to put in line. No wonder if you read the books of the likes of the Thomas Aquinas, the Pauleto, Cicero's, you read into many authors who have taken time to write about the normatives of government existence, where you have the different arms of government, and later on the conceptual analysis of what we call checks and balances. Now, in this sense, you would want to talk about the opposition as the shadow government that must cause relevant accountability in terms of checking. Because remember, we have talked about the existence of a vision, a majority vision vis-a-vis a minority vision. So the minority vision bearers are the opposition in this sense, and the majority vision bearers are the government in power. So it is both their duty, both the majority and the minority, to make sure that we have a common agenda in terms of implementation. For example, one of the recent analogies I can give you, if you remember the Tojikwatako saga. Yes. The opposition members had come up with their own understanding and true definition as to why they had arguments in not amending Article 102B of the Constitution. And they were quite clear. For them, it seemed like it was a political amendment, and they could prove that the latter.
Of the majority.
Exactly, the majority agenda holders.
Yes.
Now, for them, they looked at it as something that would help the majority agenda holders stay in power. Now, that was for them. Now, the majority agenda holders came out to say, look here, we have a reason, and they could be able. So, there's normally that attribute. However, the bigger question in all these discussions, in all these engagements, is one: where is the common person in terms of socio-economic development?
And when you say common person, who are you referring to exactly?
I'm looking at the citizenry, the mass population of the country, because at the end of the day, whether majority or minority agenda holders, their mandate is to take forward the country. Because remember that they have targets and expectations. If I may just break down for you some of the constitutional mandates of the Parliament of the Republic of Uganda, the primary and the bedrock of the same is to enact laws. And when you talk about legislation, it must be relatively also intertwined in the fact that such legalese must be important for better agenda. You talk about allocation, of resources in terms of budgetary allocation, talk about accountability, talk about issues of checks and balances. So these are most important than the divisionary agenda holdings. So for me, I think as the opposition in parliament, most recent, that is through the custody or the stewardship of the Honorable Matthias Mpuuga, causing evaluation of that up till today, it has not been vividly seen, and I can honestly tell you.
Which then causes us to think, as the shadow cabinet, you do have, of course, the new leadership of opposition. You do have leader of opposition, Matthias Mpuuga, opposition chief whip being John Nambeshe. You do have chairperson for PAC being Medard Segona. You also do have chairperson Kosase, Joel Senyonyi, and you do have chairperson government assurances, Betty Namboze, and Commissioner for Parliament, Francis Zake, and the list continues. But yes, they're shadow cabinet. What are we supposed to be benefiting? One, as Parliament, what is it supposed to be benefiting from the existence of a shadow cabinet? And then how does that trickle down to the person, the citizen, who's supposed to benefit from the legislation process?
First, when you talk about opposition, for me, most of the times to get their actual relevancy, I want to refer to them as government in waiting or alternative government, because they're meant to give us alternatives. That yes, because in multi-party dispensation or multi-party democracy, there's what we call caucusing. That some issues we may have caucusing, and you may have views of that is the majority. Now we have NRM, it has the majority in the 11th parliament. Then NUP comes in. But you see, the opposition, we are looking at all political parties that are not NRM.
So we're talking about National Unity Platform, you're talking about FDC, you're talking about GEMA, you're talking about DP.
You're talking about UPC. So that is the grouping of opposition. So their relevance in parliament, one, where I want to call them as alternative, is that they should be able to give us, if you're not in support of this, what could be the alternative policy? Can we debate it? Like the Speaker of Parliament, Jacob Bolanya, when he returned, he said, let's see it and look and have a direction we are going to go for as Parliament for the next 5 years. This meant that this is going to be people first. And he said that, yes, you could be opposition, I could be NRM. But what is people first? If we are debating something, and maybe NRM as a caucus, because they have numbers, they have come together, what alternative is the opposition giving? That's why most of the times you've heard of the minority report. That yes, the majority have their stand, but the few come up with a report clearly stating what they have found out and what their recommendations are. So that is one of the ways we see the role of the opposition. It is then upon us, the majority, to say, okay, can we adopt this or we shouldn't adopt this? Sometimes, yes, we've been disappointed by the opposition where they choose to boycott. There are a number of bills, a number of laws that have been passed, and the opposition, because of their minority, just choose to move out of parliament. Instead of perfecting their noble cause of saying on such and such a date, this was the alternative that we sought for. Of course, providing checks and balances, where we've seen them, I want to believe, when we see them head vital committees that you've talked about, Priscilla. This was not accidental. It was not about booking that, yes, I take this and take this. Let's partition committees. It was about knowing that if a member of the opposition is the chairperson of this committee, therefore, this person who may not be in government, who may not have conflict of interest, will hold transparency, will promote accountability. So those are some of the roles of the opposition. How the voter will benefit is that sometimes, yes, in multi-party dispensation, some discussions, some proposals may not be people-centered, may be party, because what happens in multi-party democracy is you have to retain power. It's not all about saying you were elected. So you must foster sometimes, like Felix said, some bills that may be politically. So the opposition, because it may not have that interest, therefore, has the capacity to be an eye-opener. That yes, there is no conflict of interest here. We are a party outside this, and this should be the alternative. Has the opposition played that? Matthias Mpuuga, in his 100 days, said his biggest achievement has been uniting the opposition. He said by the time they came to the 11th parliament, they were disgruntled, they weren't that united. He sought a number of forums to unite them and see that they can move forward to achieve that alternative giving on proposals, on initiatives, and promoting accountability as a whole.
Okay, all right. Promoting accountability, of course, challenging and influencing the legislation that goes on the floor of Parliament is one of the missions or the subjected aims of the leadership of opposition in the 11th Parliament. But as we get into deep of this conversation, we want to hear of your view on how opposition can get involved in the country's social economical development, which is our poll question this morning. And the number on your screen, you can send us a WhatsApp on that number and give us your opinions, which we shall be checking out later on. Turning to socio-economic development. Before we get into socio-economic development, we have seen the leadership of opposition being stricken down by the insecurity, especially what we have been seeing in Greater Masaka. You know, the ruling party, leaders from the ruling party, security organs coming out to say that the reason as to why we're having growing insecurity in Masaka is because of opposition, and that stems down to the fact that now it's no longer a region that is being led by NRM, it's now a region being led by NUP. But away from that, we had two members of parliament, Mohamed Segrinya and also Alan Tewanyana, who have been put away because of alleged coming up with a plan to create what the havoc that we're seeing in Masaka. All these have hit opposition. So let's talk about opposition and security in this country, then tie that into socio-economic development.
Yeah, well, of course, socio-economic development in terms of politicking or the parliament may not be a direct appreciation. You must also note that it is not something that you will expect directly to earn from parliament, even as an institution. Then that will work downward to members of parliament. The best we can get out of them is basically indirect, under their confines, in terms of one, allocating budgets or budgetary allocations that are relevant. For example, looking at the dire sectors of the country in terms of what should be done vis-a-vis what is being done. You want to look at the most relevant sectors like agriculture. How is Parliament allocating money to them? All right. Secondly, you look at the healthcare, look at infrastructure development, look at security. The question is, what is the role of the opposition in enhancing the most relevant allocations of the budget? Do they ever engage in some of these discussions away from politicking? You know, do we have them hold a bit? Because I know for a fact that probably the leader of opposition has a budget to consult us and what. Do they engage their people? Or do we see a 5 years spent in issues of politicking, agenda, what, and all these kind of things? So I think for me the challenge that is left with my senior Honorable Mpuga is that he has to now make a great investment into content development, and for the opposition in particular to be able to lift the caliber of the kind of membership he has on his side. Thank God now he has quite a huge number. At least he has certainly a region he's sure of, and certainly the same region also he knows the background in terms of what they can do economically. Between you and me, know that the greater part of the central region is engulfed into agriculture. Now, how does the opposition, being in charge of this region, use its power to be able to lobby in terms of legislation, in terms of budgetary allocation, in terms of international lobbying? For me, I feel that that is why he can work directly into socio-economic development. Secondly, in terms of security, which you asked me, I will say this. Security is a reserve of the security forces in terms of intelligence, what they have and what they know. The statement that the region is insecure because of the opposition politics, I find that, in my opinion, are not conclusive in a way. But I also believe it's a good way of politicking for whoever spent it. It's a good way for politics. But the question then would be, what is the role of the opposition in pacifying their areas of leadership in regions? Do they have a role? That's key. Do they have a role. Now, I have said time and again that we must be able to, we must be keen to take notice of everything we do as politicians, whether in the heat of a passion, what we say, whether in the heat of a moment in terms of political agitations or whatever there be. We must be keen to know. Now, it may not be direct, but it may be indirectly affecting security or growth of regions. So I think this must be swallowed in a bitter pill of accepting to grow our political stature in terms of practices. What caliber of politicians do we have? Now, we must then also accept to raise the standard of who qualifies to be a politician in this great country. One, is it a matter of academic credential? Is it a matter of being a senior citizen? Is it a matter of application? Should there be some sort of, like normally we remember when I was going to law school, we used to have pre-entries. So we must have a standardized appreciation of who qualifies to practice politics. And this is for both the opposition and as well the party in leadership.
Okay, all right. We had the leader of opposition coming up with a 17-point strategy. How will this strategy fit into socio-economic development, Robert, in line with the fact that it's one that has the biggest budget in terms of dispensing legislation and influencing or even challenging what happens in the floor of parliament?
When the leader of opposition, Matthias Mpuga, comes out and says that this is our work plan this time around, where we hope to ensure we have socio-economic transformation. First and foremost, you need to unite the opposition. Like he said, he has tried to, but there is something that has to, there is still this gap, where today you find that one political parties sometimes rear statements of attacking each other, and if you're not in sync, you may not go in the same direction. So there's still a gap of uniting the opposition. Then second, you know, when you have a vision, people must buy into. How do you sell this to other members of the opposition to understand and know that it's not a Mpuga thing? It's now a burden for the entire opposition. It's our vision that in these 5 years, we can look down and hold this victory together as the opposition, not as NUP, not as Mpuga himself as the leader of opposition. Then after you've done that, it's also important to empower your members of parliament. Like Felix said, you know, many of the times our opposition politics, in one way or the other, has been what I usually refer to as massicular politics. Massicular politics, that is calling upon people, let's gather, let's protest. How do you ensure that you move to a level of dialogue? You move to a level of reasoning, more than a level of saying we can protest, we can protest. Here's a messenger one time said, those that think I'm not opposition enough, what have I not done? Mugisha Muto's answer was very clear, that if you've done the same thing over and over and it has not yielded that is there for tangible results, why not we try an alternative? Why don't we now foster putting dialogue? Because with the current way of politicking, that is why Felix said that sometimes in terms of security, that what we say, what we do, to you who is saying it, you may not know the impact of how fight is going to go and what it is going to call therefore. So you need to have a united force. You need to have a force that buys in and owns what you're putting on table, then with their belief that this can be achievable.
Okay. Finally, Felix, we know that this is a system that was copy and paste from our colonial masters. We want to assess, is it still an important role or a necessary evil that we must continue with the legislative kind of business that we have? Also, how best can it be synergized with the common objectives of the House of Parliament?
Well, first and foremost, about 90 or 80% of all the things we do in terms of political practices here, even government formation, I copy from probably the Anglophone political style. So we have been lost far deep into what we copied So it is easier for us to go ahead than to go back. So probably we are safer with just keeping up with where we are. But how do we make it better? Maybe is something that we can discuss into. I think as a matter of fact, we as a country must first and foremost be able to cover the gap of the absence of a common vision. Once we are able to develop a common vision where all parties, where all stakeholders, whether be opposition, whether be government, whether you name yourself, you must fit in a common vision of a country. Now, the commonality of such a vision must again be qualified by 4 aspects. In my opinion, 1, that it must be common to all Ugandans. That's key. Secondly, it must not be under any form of contestation by either the opposition or what we call the majority mandate holders and the minority. There must be no contestation. Third, it must be acceptable for us as a country. But fourth, it must also not be contrary to natural justice. That it must reflect natural justice. Now, once we have a common vision as a country, every so-be-called politician, every so-be-called political party, name it, will work to fit under the mandates of this vision. So if you are a opposition, if you are party, if you are whatever, there's something that will guide us. So we would have set the limits in terms of standards, the ceiling, and the floor for us.
All right, thank you so much. We are coming to a round of this conversation. You have had Robert Chirabo's submission. You've had Felix Nkunda's submission. I will crown it up by saying, at the end of the day, there should be a common ball. That I should be on that common ball, both opposition and those that are in the regime. So it shouldn't be about regime and changing the regime. It should be about changing the livelihood of Ugandans as a whole. That way, there can be enhancement in socio-economic growth of this country, especially in a time where we're being hit by COVID-19. We need a common goal more than we need division at the end of the day. Good Morning Uganda does continue with our newspapers. We're going to be looking at what's making headlines on the 20th of September 2021. Stay with us.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Uganda, today is a great day to work towards your dreams. Dial *185 *7# and select savings to save as low as 500 Ugandan shillings on regular savings or 250,000 Ugandan shillings for fixed deposits. Airtel Money Super Saver is powered by KCB Bank Uganda. Airtel Money, instant, secure, borderless. T's and C's apply.
Getting GoTV was the best decision James has ever made. Finding a good place to watch football was never easy, but it was costly until James discovered something big. Now he can finally enjoy the benefits of homegrown advantage with a decoder and 1 month of GoTV value. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cap competitions. GoTV Uganda, love it.
Echa COVID-19 kijja kugwa only if we stay at home, observe physical distancing, wear masks properly, sanitize or wash our hands with soap and water regularly, or get vaccinated now.
When you talk about our motherland Uganda, the pearl of Africa, you cannot fail to smile because of the smile that fills the faces of the citizens. Our nice good weather and nature that sustains us all, that enables us all to continue each in their own way because we are all different even according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Alleluia Jinga tea drink and Alleluia tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Alleluia Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Alleluia from all shops around.
5 for 5, 5 times the winning, yeah. 5 times the happiness, yeah. 5 times the luckiness, yeah. 5 for 5, oh yeah. It's 5 for 5. 5 for 5, 5 times the money, yeah. 5 times the shopping, yeah. 5 times the prizes, yeah. 5 for 5, oh yeah. It's 5 for 5. 5 for 5.
Win 100,000 Uganda shillings weekly in the 5 for 5 jackpot. Simply download the Center mobile app. Click Center on the go to open your account online. Transact 5 times or more using Center mobile, Center Visa, and Center agent to stand a chance to win. The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. So, participate in the 5 for 5 jackpot and win millions in daily and weekly prizes. The 5 for 5 jackpot is brought to you by Centenary Bank. Our bank, Centenary Bank, is regulated by the Bank of Uganda. Customer deposits are protected by the Deposit Protection Fund.
Experience 100% 4G speeds across Uganda with the Airtel 4G Pocket Wi-Fi available at 123,000 shillings only. It comes with a backup battery and 15 GB free for 1 month. Visit the nearest Airtel shop, device selling shop or Airtel online shop. www.airtel.co.ug/broadband-discover. Airtel, the smartphone network.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Well, in case you're coming to town, don't forget to carry an umbrella, a jacket or something that will not only keep you warm, but also avoid you getting wet. It is drizzling, and maybe later on, Molen will tell us if we are going to be having heavy showers or it's just going to be a bit of drizzling and a cold day throughout. But it is time we look at some of the stories that are dominating the papers this morning. I have the New Vision and my colleague has the Daily Monitor. Now, the lockdown issue still becomes a problem in the education sector, and a big headline there in the New Vision: 7 million pupils, that is to join P1 should schools reopen in January next year as proposed for now. Still, the New Vision pays tribute to the late Jonah Ranga, and headline there: Jonah Ranga had no personal property. That is the late Archbishop of the Orthodox Church of Uganda, who is going to be buried today at Namungona, the church. Still, the New Vision: NSS's bill NSSF bill, where we see Minister Amongi Olanya disagree. Over what? Well, the New Vision gives you more of that, but that is regarding to the midterm benefits for workers that have served for 10 years, clocked 45 years to earn their 20% of that. Registration, that is how to secure your marriage. The New Vision gives you details there. How do you ensure that, yes, it is just not you people being together, but there is something that binds you legally. The New Vision gives you more of that. Then still, there is a special pull out for you regarding, that is the Taxman URA celebrating 30 years of existence. The achievements, the challenges, the New Vision brings you more of that. The education column, pass O level. This morning, the New Vision has Senior 3 Physics, Mathematics, and Literature, but not forgetting the Senior 2s, where there is Biology and Chemistry. It's not yet all over. The crave for justice, septic tank murder, Museveni calls family. That is the Francis Onebe, and that is the murder of Immaculate Onebe. The president calls for the family, and whatever will be discussed there, or to be discussed, there is more for you in the New Vision.
Now, in the Daily Monitor, Robert, the army to recruit at least 2,000 graduates, and workers protest Olanya's decision on NSSF cash access. In Health and Living, the curious case of repeat adolescent births, and mystery over 18 new graves in Tororo village. Now, stop hosting Salim Saleh's guests, Gulu Hotels warned, and we want revenge, says Aiso's family. Now, Blood Bank won't take blood from sex workers, and of course the lizard comes in to ask, yet they are lucky to get the blood for free. But also inside the papers, now we're looking at Samia Suluhu, says she will be running in 2025. Manny Pacquiao also, she will be standing for presidency there in the Philippines. Now, from the archives, then the Pope of Orthodox Church of Alexandria, Africa, his beatitude, that is a Periach Petro, holds a cock given to him by now the late Archbishop Rwanga. And in history today, NRM announces army to serve on contracts, and DC abolishes the slave trade.
Well, in the New Vision, we begin with the COVID-19 tracker, where it seems, yes, cases are shooting up. Looking at new confirmed cases, there are 129. Then positivity rate has also shot up. That is at 3.6%. Deaths, new deaths are 5. And looking at total deaths so far for our country, Uganda, that is 3,128. Please do not be part of these statistics. Perfect the SOPs. Then we look at facts or myth regarding COVID-19. Can COVID-19 be transmitted through a housefly? Well, they give you more of that regarding COVID-19. And finally, did you know that Kampala became a city on October 8th, 1962?
Now, in sports, Robert, you already enjoy coffee and volleyball, or team downplays lack of playing time. But also, Lingard settles GOAT affair to silence spirited Hammer. Now, under 20, a team pokes holes in crested cranes prep.
And in the New Vision, URA marches to the next level. Also, they give you more regarding streaming, where the streamer is back to the pool. Who are they referring to? These and more. Ruben will be here to give you all the sports updates.
But of course, also now we want to link to Priscilla Nalwoga, who will be giving us these traffic updates.
Well, you see the view of one of the grandest buildings in terms of architecture, and that is the Crested Towers. It's one of those buildings where you say, yeah, we do have architectures in Uganda. But I am standing on Naila Avenue, where it is the home of Uganda Broadcasting Corporation, our home this morning as we step into the nature. I'm also seeing something here that I think was once supposed to be parking tickets. You see, this particular line that we have on the road is meant to separate the road where motion is happening for vehicles and the side of the road where you were allowed to park back in the day. And I think you were supposed to come, make your payment, punch in your card, and then it shows you how long you've been there. And then you are given either for 1 hour, you are accorded 2 hours, up to even 8 hours. you were supposed to pay for that ticket and then you can drive away. The system was once that simple, but today the system is different. We have men and women on the road that act on behalf of KCCA to be able to bill you every time you're parked on the road, and that billing is 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, and accordance. If you have the money, you can park on the roadside for an entire day, but it must have the demarcation to indicate that there's a part for parking on that road, or else we're going to be having a lot of traffic jam in the country and in the city, more so what is known as double parking. Double parking is where you're parked in a wrong place, so the lane is not fully utilized because you're in a wrong place or you have parked in the wrong place. So please take note of that. Now also just to remind you that we are at Nile Avenue. Behind us is the subway roundabout. Once upon a time, we used to have a lot of traffic down there, train movement down there. But of course, today it's history. It's just a monument, but it's a very interesting place if you go underground. On the other side to Serena, we do have Chintu Road that will drop you at Yusuf Lule. Yusuf Lule today morning, the traffic lights, there's a bit of jam because people are trying to connect from Mulago roundabout and connect to this other side of Ginger Road. And so there's a lot of traffic jam on those traffic lights. But of course, if they're managed by police, trust that they will be able to get you to your next destination in time. But also, we want to take a look at some of your comments that have come through in our poll question. We were wondering, in your opinion, how can opposition get involved more in the country's social and economic development? And we do have a message here that says, this is Alfred Echao from Soroti City. First, I thank the studio for your tremendous work. And in your opinion, may God bless all people heavily. In your observation, people are after elections and people are after money, not exactly deliberating for the normal Ugandan, the common good. Well, that is one of the things that has come out from our dialogue with me and Robert alongside Felix. We get to understand that at the end of the day, there should be the common objective for Parliament as a whole to cause livelihood betterment to the common Ugandan. Well, that's it from our common Ugandan's traffic update. We go on with Molen Kenyana after the break, where she'll be talking about the drizzle this morning. Good morning.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Getting GoTV was the best decision James has ever made. Finding a good place to watch football was never easy, but it was costly. Until James discovered something big. Now he can finally enjoy the benefits of homegrown advantage with a decoder and 1 month of GoTV value. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cup competitions. GoTV Uganda, love it.
Experience 100% 4G speeds across Uganda with the Airtel 4G Pocket Wi-Fi available at 123,000 shillings only. It comes with a backup battery and 15 GB free for 1 month. Visit the nearest Airtel shop, device selling shop or Airtel online shop. www.airtel.co.ug/broadband-discover. Airtel, the smartphone network.
Echa COVID-19 kijja kuggwa only if we stay at home, observe physical distancing, wear masks properly, sanitize or wash our hands with soap and water regularly, or get vaccinated now.
It's no secret that ICT makes learning easy.
The strides made in our field could not be possible without it.
And now we can watch our favorite show.
My radio is my best friend.
UCC provides an enabling regulatory environment and policy guidance for healthy competition. We also facilitate ease of doing business in the communications sector through licensing, standardization, spectrum management, tariff regulation, rural communication development, and consumer empowerment. An informed consumer is an empowered consumer. UCC supports local content and innovations. Driving the development of the vast communication sector in Uganda is Uganda Communications Commission.
Patriotism is a feeling of love, devotion, and the willingness to sacrifice for one's country.
I say no to corruption because I put my country first. I choose peace over violence because I put my country first.
Be patriotic, Uganda first. This message is brought to you by the National...
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Yes, it is still a drizzly morning here at UBC and the rest of Kampala. Most places are actually dealing with rainy conditions, but those will be clearing. We are starting to see the sun come out, and that should be able to bring in a little bit of sunshine. But for now, I think most of us are enjoying a little bit of rains there. Well, talking about rains, we did have a heavy downpour over the weekend, and that caused a lot of devastating effects. We did see landslides across parts of eastern Uganda, and unfortunately also we lost someone, a grandmother who was swept away due to the heavy floods that actually led to the landslides over parts of eastern Uganda, but also more heavy downpours across the southwestern part of the country, across the Rwenzori region. We did see flooded areas across Kagadi and also across the northern part of the Rwenzori region. That area is still in hotspot for what we're expecting as heavy rains. As we talk about the rainy season, that is September to December, but also looking at the events that are happening in terms of wet weather conditions, we did forecast for this second major rainy season to have less rains than we usually have for this season. But it also means that even with the less rains that are expected, some of those that usually come in do come in at a heavy rate. So you find that the area has been having dry conditions for at least a week. But then again, when the rains come, they do actually pose to be heavy rains, and thus leading to floods, thus leading to landslides, which is why we continue to tell the ministry and also the Department of Disaster, even when we do forecast these rains to happen, especially the hotspots, and I've always emphasized the hotspots. We do have areas in Uganda that are known to always be affected by floods, to always be affected by landslides. So yes, these are areas that you need to look out for. We can't continue losing lives, losing property due to extreme weather events that are obviously going to be happening, especially now that we're talking about variations in our seasons, variations in the climate. Kasese is one of those areas, and actually the whole of that Rwenzori region is one of the areas that we have looked at as being hotspots for flooding. Now, eastern Uganda, we have had in the last decade, we have had more landslides over that area than we did have before, and I'm talking about the pre-industrial levels. We are looking at, especially Bududa, we did have a devastating one in 2010 that claimed a lot of lives, and a lot of people lost their property. Now, Bududa and also that whole area, the Olgon area, has been a hotspot for landslides. So what do we do when we are expecting rains? When the forecast is saying this area is supposed to be having more rains, and last week we did look at the forecast that was taking in up to 15th, then leading to this weekend, that is also leading to 22nd, looking at the Elgon region having more rainy conditions compared to the rest of the country. So that means that as we continue to see, and some time back I did explain on how these landslides come about, as these continued rains continue over a certain area, it means that this land is already getting more waters into the soil. So the soil is becoming weak, and that means after some time it is prone to landslides, especially for areas that have been hotspots for landslides. So that is something we need to consider as we talk about disaster and preparedness, as we talk about evacuation plans, especially for the areas that are close to that region, because we do still have this season going, and that will continue until early December, where we expect rains to reduce. So in the meantime, we continue to tell people who are close to these areas, the Elgon region, the Rwenzori region, please be aware, be alert. When there are heavy downpours, try to make sure you are on safer grounds. Try to make sure you are not in the line of these heavy downpours, because it could actually be devastating. Well, this morning, we want to go ahead and take a look at our forecast for different areas across the country. We have already seen rains that started off here in the central Lake Victoria Basin, but then that was only over a few areas across Kampala, also for parts of Wakiso, but most of that region has already cleared. Now, the forecast this morning indicates for the eastern part of Lake Victoria Basin, that is where we have Tororo. We do have Jinja in that category as well. We do have Iganga, Mayuge, Bujiri. That area is expected to have showers, and those are going up to 23 degrees centigrade. Quite a cold morning over the eastern parts of Lake Victoria. Now, moving on to the central Lake Victoria Basin, we do have Kampala in that category, Mukono, Buyukwe, and Tebe. That area did start off with rains, but we are expecting to have sunny intervals as the day progresses into the afternoon. We will have that sun coming through already, starting off with also a cool 22 degrees centigrade. It is already feeling chilly even as we speak. Well, the western part of Lake Victoria Basin, that is where we have Rakai, we have Masaka, Rengo, we have Zimbabwe. That area is also expected to clear into sunny intervals as the day progresses. Temperatures expected at 23 degrees centigrade, also a cold morning. Now, western parts of central, that is Mitiana, also sunny intervals. Eastern central, we have Ruwero, Nakaseke, Nakasongola, also sunny intervals, starting with a 23 degrees centigrade for this morning. Quite also a cold day, and we will be having rains across that area later in the afternoon. Well, midwestern Uganda expected to have rainy conditions. Midwestern, we do have Masindi in that category. Hoima, that area can expect to have rains this morning. Now, northern Rwenzori across Kabarore, Chenjojo, that area is also expected to have showers. Kasese, Wera, also we're expecting rains, but Kasese starting off at 24 degrees centigrade. We do have Kigezi Highlands, that is Kabale, Rukunjiri. That area also expected to have sunny intervals, and temperatures are at a low 21 degrees centigrade. quite actually a cold weather starting off from Cape Verde Highlands, and this area is always associated with mostly a cold weather going to the lower 20s. Looking at Eastern Tioga, we have Soroti, we have Katakwi, Amuria in that category, also expected to have intervals of sunny and cloudy conditions, and temperatures are at 25 degrees centigrade. Northeastern Uganda, where we have Kotido, that area is expected to have isolated showers. And also for Mount Elgon Highlands, we do have Mbale, we do have Bududa in that category. This area, this is the region that has been having a heavy downpour, and also still on a lookout, still on alert for likelihood of floods. We do expect rains this morning, starting off at 22 degrees centigrade. Now, Eastern Lowlands, we have Palisa, we have Bodaka, Bukedia. That area is expected to have sunny intervals, starting off at a chilly 23 degrees centigrade. Well, that's all we have for you this morning in terms of our forecast. And we shall also remember that this is coming in from the Uganda National Meteorological Authority. I want to send shout outs to the men and women at the National Meteorological Center who make sure that we do get this forecast every morning. Well, I want to leave you to a chilly morning here in Kampala, but most areas look to be having a pleasant morning. Well, my name is Molen Kenyana. We do have Good Morning Uganda agenda coming up. Robert is ready and set to take you through that.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Getting GoTV was the best decision James has ever made. Finding a good place to watch football was never easy, but it was costly until James discovered something big. Now he can finally enjoy the benefits of homegrown advantage with a decoder and 1 month of GoTV Valley. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cup competitions. GoTV Uganda, love it.
Patriotism is a feeling of love, devotion, and the willingness to sacrifice for one's country.
I say no to corruption because I put my country first. I choose peace over violence because I put my country first.
I love Uganda. I serve Uganda. I sacrifice for Uganda. I'm loyal to Uganda. I love myself.
Be patriotic. Uganda first. This message is brought to you by the National Secretariat for Patriotism Co-Uganda, Office of the President.
Nature that nurtures our life on Earth determines the geographical surrounding that should be protected and preserved by the community.
This is the time we partner with UBC and protect the environment.
Our Environment is a program that will showcase the importance of human responsibility in a healthy environment, that is to say, conservation, waste management and recycling, disease prevention, biogas to mention but a few.
Support the program Our Environment on UBC.
Inspiring Uganda.
It's no secret that ICT makes learning easy.
The strides made in our field could not be possible without it.
And now we can watch our favorite shows.
My radio is my best friend.
UCC provides an enabling regulatory environment and policy guidance for healthy competition. We also facilitate ease of doing business in the communications sector through licensing, standardization, spectrum management, tariff regulation, rural communication development, and consumer empowerment. An informed consumer is an empowered consumer. UCC supports local content and innovations. Driving the development of a robust communication sector in Uganda is Uganda Communications Commission.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Ne kamera eri wajja tindi kamera ndaba etunudde eri. Welcome back from Weather and Nature. That is with Molen Kenyana. It is now time for our GMU agenda. Remember, this is a time when we look at an issue of national concern, and usually we have a guest in studios. And this morning we happen to be having an expert from the Ministry of Education. To be precise, that is the spokesperson of the Ministry for Education and Sports, Dr. Dennis Mujimba, with whom we are going to be discussing a lot of things, ranging from when the big question being asked by majority of Ugandans, when are schools opening in Uganda? Second, questions like, what is happening if our colleagues are doing it? Why are we not doing it? But also, we shall be looking at the proposed short curriculum that the ministry has resorted to ensure that even when schools open, it's not going to be the usual syllabus. Some content is going to be removed, and only what they feel is vital will be retained. Doctor, a lovely morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Well, thank you for finding time
You're
again
welcome.
this morning
To
be with us and discuss many issues regarding the 15 million Ugandans that are now out of school because of COVID-19. Doctor, to begin with, there is a question that many Ugandans are asking now. You know, we are in the East African community, and the world has become, it is just a global village. People are wondering, when we see schools in Kenya open and people are going to school, we see our neighbors in Tanzania, we see a number of countries within this region that have high infection rates, that is in terms of people that are getting sick of COVID-19, even have registered high death compared to what Uganda is registering. The big question is, why not us open if others are doing so?
Thank you so much, Robert, and thank you for inviting us. That question of looking at our neighbors, one, it is a good thing. It is always good to look around you, what is happening, because one, you don't live in an island. And number two, what happens in your neighborhood does affect you. Now, regarding their progress with reopening of education institutions, it is important that even as we desire to imitate them, we need to be willing to walk the journey they walked to get where they are. Number one, for starters, I'm going to use two countries as an example here, Kenya and Rwanda. Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda got the COVID-19 vaccines around the same time, just days apart.
True.
That was in March. Now, within 1 month, that is mid-April, Kenya had vaccinated about 570,000 people with the first dose. Rwanda had vaccinated 330,000 people with the first dose. Uganda had vaccinated 220,000 within 1 month. But we got vaccines around the same time.
Under the COVAX.
Yes. The same, just within a week. But you can see the difference. Okay. A month, then around mid-May, and I remember this very well, Kenya had vaccinated over 900,000 people with the first dose. Uganda was at 420,000. Now, in the 900,000 that over 900,000 that Kenya had vaccinated, they had vaccinated 145,000 teachers. When Kenya was vaccinating 140,000 teachers with the first dose, Uganda was not yet at even 6,000 teachers. Meanwhile, in around mid-April, end of April, the Minister of Health made an alarm, Honorable Ruth Acheng. Her and the First Lady, our minister, said, what do we do to ensure that our teachers get vaccinated? They began blowing the trumpet, but our teachers were not forthcoming. Meanwhile, the neighbors you want to imitate, for them they have vaccinated 145,000 teachers. Yet
teachers
you all
are responding. Yes.
Teachers are responding. Now, around that time of mid-May, Rwanda, which we also want to imitate with reopening, had vaccinated 60,000 people with the second dose. They were not just on the first dose. So meanwhile, these are the people we want to imitate. We want to do we want to be where they are, but we are not willing to do what they did to get there. Now, this issue of cases, by the way, once a population is vaccinated, the number of cases of COVID-19 should not be a big deal. What should be the big deal are the severe cases and the deaths. You look at the United Kingdom, look at Israel. The issue is vaccination prevents severe disease. And therefore, once it breaks the cycle of severe disease, it also reduces the probability of ICUs, admissions, and also deaths. Now, for these countries which are still growing in their vaccination rates, especially like Uganda, we still are very susceptible to severe cases of COVID among our population. So that is why government prioritized and said we need to vaccinate our teachers because, one, they are frontline workers in the education system. Number two, the vaccines we have are suitable for that age group. We don't have vaccine for kids. Even our neighbors are not focusing on vaccinating kids. The principle of reopening is because they have vaccinated teachers. Number two, there is strict discipline on the observance of SOPs in the schools, mask wearing, hand washing and sanitizing. All these things are
So
followed.
who do we hold a doctor with vaccination?
Yes.
We can say the teachers have delayed this. Those two are the issues we can look at, maybe accessibility,
yes.
How available these vaccines have been. But when it comes to complying to the SOPs in schools, if you remember, after the first wave, we had a reopening of schools. And what happened? You, the ministry, assured Ugandans, we have enough inspectors, we are going to do this, we are going to do that. It was an assurance and a well-drafted plan from the Ministry of Education and Sports. But before we went to the second lockdown, what was coming from schools was alarming. We lost many people because they contracted COVID-19 from students who returned home.
Now, Robert, that's a very legitimate concern. The UNICEF found out that in Eastern Southern Africa, boarding students were the leading culprits in spreading of COVID from the institutions back to the community. It means boarding institutions can be a hotspot of trouble with COVID-19. Now, that is why they are saying, and UNICEF has been saying this, that you can reopen, but you have to reopen safely. First of all, ensure your teachers are vaccinated.
Okay.
Ensure adherence to SOPs, especially social distancing. Don't open 100%. You can open phased way, like we are trying. You are planning in Uganda. So what happened with our case here is that inspectors are not supposed to be 24-hour policemen or officers in these institutions. When you don't take responsibility as the head of the institution to ensure that SOPs are observed in your school, in your college, or in your university, you cannot now turn around and say, I became complacent because an inspector is not around. I think as Ugandans, we need to take responsibility, first of all, of our own lives. It is important that we remain healthy in times like this. Number two, when we are leaders of institutions, we need to be faithful stewards. You have human beings with you. It is in your best interest that they remain safe. So in this round, now what we are saying, we are going to hold you, Robert, the head of that institution, that school, accountable for observance of SOPs. What do these include? One, standards of mask wearing, all those ones will have to be observed, includes phased reopening. We also heard of some schools, when they released candidates to come back, some schools sneaked in sub-candidate classes. Now, you don't really need, Robert, you don't need an inspector to come and tell you what you're doing is wrong. That should be a personal initiative and out of patriotism. Because you know, if you break the rules, you're putting the whole country, the whole community and the county in danger.
Doctor,
yes,
talking
please.
About this, good you're a medical doctor. And when we talk about issues of health, you know they are priority.
Yes.
Now we went into a liberal economy and education in Uganda is mostly dominated by the private sector. Most schools are owned by individuals. So, and we know that this has proven something they have not complied to, because it's all about maximizing profits. It seems to be a service. So as the ministry, even before we go to the proposed and how soon we are going to open our schools, which safeguards are you putting in place that should we reopen away from the vaccination, compliance, because just relying on the public seems to have failed, Doctor?
Now, what in our strategies, first of all, because as a ministry, we are part of government, and government is responsible for oversight of all business taking place in the country, whether public or private. So in all our interventions right now, we are working alongside the private sector as well. We are not leaving them out in all the trainings, preparation of trainers, training of heads of institutions at the local governments. We are actually bringing them on board. Just last week, we closed a workshop that was bringing together 500 heads of institutions and DEOs to train them on compliance with these SOPs, surveillance in schools, all these things that we put in place to ensure that when we reopen, not if, when we reopen, we do so safely, not just in government, but also in private institutions. Number two, we are going to strengthen our linkages and relationships between the COVID-19 district task forces and the education institutions, both private and public. Because you see, they are private service providers, but they are taking in Ugandans. And our responsibility as government is to ensure that every Ugandan who goes to access any service from any education institution is protected. So it is our responsibility to take that one on. And that is why we are bringing the private sector on board. Then number three, we are ensuring that in our monitoring as a function of the sector, we include going out to see what is happening in these institutions. That is very critical for us. Now, every support that we also afford within our means as government, we are not leaving out the private sector. One of them is, for example, this now is only for learners, is the issue of the home study materials. We are also giving it to the home private sector, private service providers, learners. So that is what we are doing, but we are not leaving the private providers behind. They are part and parcel of us.
Well, our viewers, you can please be part of this topic of discussion by sending in your SMS message, WhatsApp message to our number, and that is the number on your screen. Feel free to send in your question, your concern to the spokesperson of the Ministry of Education and Sports, Dr. Dennis Mujimba, who is with us in studios this morning as we are looking at the opening of schools in this country. Now, Doctor, this brings us to the question, when is it safe to reopen education institutions in Uganda? We've had speculations, many tabloids, many dailies would have reported in January, and all this has an impact on the parent. How you prepare yourself has an impact on stakeholders in this area, the teachers. So when is it safe so that we avoid this today, tomorrow, today, tomorrow?
Thank you. Now, as of the end of last week, we are very sure some dates of reopening timelines have been put in place. And those ones, His Excellency, the President will be communicating them very soon, very soon, very, very soon. We just have to keep on monitoring his Twitter handle. An announcement will come out very soon. Number two, when we reopen, it is not going to be based on just the number of cases of COVID. Because as I told you, we know countries where the cases are very high, but schools have reopened. They have done so safely because the teachers and the community is vaccinated. And they've not necessarily vaccinated 100%. They've gone above 50% and people have reopened. So one of the things that have been emphasized by this government is that we have to focus on vaccinating the critical mass. And that is about 4.8 million people. That includes frontline workers. That's where teachers and non-teaching staff are. That includes the vulnerable, people aged above 50 years. Then we have also the people with pre-existing conditions. So our experts have advised that once we have 4.8 million people vaccinated in this country, we are working on safe ground. And now the vaccines are already here. Robert, what we want to urge our people is go for the vaccine jab if you're eligible in these categories. There is no shortcut out of this. It is very evident countries that have high cases, as long as they are vaccinating, it is manageable, because you now begin managing like a flu, a common flu.
You don't have hospitalizations,
you don't, exactly.
severe illnesses and death.
No, you don't. And that is the advantage with vaccination. But I can tell you, if government just takes the stand of, you know what, tulumbe oba tufa tufe, if a school loses 2-3 teachers, you'll hear pandemonium in this country. So it is a responsibility of government to ensure that we reopen, but when we do so in a safe manner. And safety begins with vaccination right now. These countries have told you, people want us to reopen like Rwanda, Kenya. They have vaccinated. We cannot desire to do to be where they are when we don't want to vaccinate. So as the Minister of Education and Sports has been saying, please, teachers, non-teaching staff, children or adults who are 18 years and above, who are in tertiary institutions, go get vaccinated.
Doctor,
and just on that, a bit on that, Robert. South Africa, which was the worst hit in Africa with COVID-19, they reopened tertiary institutions. How did they do it? They vaccinated their students.
Return, you're vaccinated.
Return, you're vaccinated.
I love that South Africa did it.
Exactly.
Reporting to school,
report at
you're
school,
vaccinated.
you're jabbed. They also did it for their staff. So that it's not that COVID first went away, then they reopened. No, they vaccinated, then they reopened. And that is what government is saying. In fact, in all the discussions, you don't hear people say third wave, at least in the meetings I've been in. I have not heard the First Lady say, oh, you see, third wave is coming. No. She is saying, let's vaccinate. I've heard the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Health say, let us vaccinate. Once we have a critical mass vaccinated, we can withstand any wave in this country.
Well, that calls for you Ugandans in these categories. Please, let's go for these vaccinations. I took my jab, and doctor took his jab, and many have. Religious leaders have done that. Culture leaders have done that. VIPs in government positions, the First Lady, the President, all have taken this vaccine. It is safe. If it has not killed them, it won't kill you. Let's embrace vaccination. But also, Doctor, let's look at some of these proposals in the reopening. Today, one of the dailies had a big headline, the huge number, about 7,000 expected to enter P1 should we reopen. We don't have these spaces.
Now that is a legitimate
7 million
concern.
actually.
Yes, thank you so much. That's a legitimate concern that if we reopen, we have about 7 million learners who will be joining P1. Because we have closed for long, for about 2 years now. Now, one way of handling this and ensuring that we reopen safely is by phasing. So in our plans, when we reopen, we want to bring in P1 to P3 together in the phase. We are not going to reopen the entire primary school subsector. Now, those 7 to 9 million learners, when they come, they'll have the entire facilities that would have been used for all the pupils in that school. Take an example. Let's say school has 1,000 pupils or 500. When you, instead, if you reopen just for lower primary school, it means that these classrooms which were used by 500 pupils are now open to be used by the 300. So you have SOPs, social distancing opportunity to observe. The second is that we are saying, even if you reopen for P1 to P3, P1 and P3 should not study all the 5 days of the week or 5-6 days of the week together. They should study, P1 to P2 will study Monday, maybe to Wednesday. Then the other class studies Thursday to Saturday. So we are also thinking of expanding the study week from being just 5 days to 6 days. Now, if we realize, as we estimate, and these estimations, by the way, came from the National Planning Authority, if we realize that P1 is so huge, then we shall say that let us have a staggered reopening, whereby even if you call back P1 to P3, you will say Monday to Wednesday, let us have P1 alone study, because the pupils are very many. And then we have P4, P2 and P3 study from Thursday to Saturday. The arrangement we have is that when we reopen, it does not mean only teachers for lower primary will show up. All the teachers of the school should show up, because the way they are trained in their colleges now, any teacher should be able to teach those lower classes you're not specializing, right? We've not yet gotten to a level where you say, for me, I've specialized in only upper primary education delivery or learning delivery. So that is something that we are doing as a country. But we are ensuring that when we reopen, it will be safe. It will be safe for the learner and primarily the person whom I call the first aid giver, who is the teacher, must be protected. And the best way to protect this teacher is through vaccination. The best way to protect the learner is social distancing and mask wearing. So in this time, it is important that we as parents begin to prepare. How can we prepare? We can prepare by begin preparing masks. You can either buy or you can stitch them yourself, cotton masks for your children. It is a matter of when, but they are going to go back to school. Number two, our government is considerate. We are not going to reopen next week when we know that you've not been working. So even the timeline that is going to be communicated by government, it is going to take into consideration that I and you, the parents, need time to raise some money to ensure that we facilitate our child's learning. Because though government in UPE and USE is shielding some financial implication, but there are other students who are in private schools who are paying full-blown tuition fee. So government will also consider giving you enough time to prepare for this. So the issue of you being given notice is also paramount in the decision government is going to take.
Thank you, Doctor. There are a number of messages. Thank you for keeping them coming in. I hope time will allow us to read at least half of them. Let me just begin with some coming in. Chirabo, I'm David Odua. I think the most suitable way is open schools and vaccinate teachers at schools for those who are not yet. The hardcore can be dealt with accordingly. As for me, I am done with all my jabs and I'm looking very safe. Vaccinate them at school. Then we still have Doctor, don't you think that you are most likely going to lose a good number of teachers if opening is attached to vaccination? That is given the poor working conditions and poor government response in terms of relief, which forced most of the teachers out of the profession. Still, we have Happy Good Morning Uganda, Amiriam from Kagadi. The question, how does the Education Ministry come up with statistics they are talking about in Uganda? Here, say a total number of teachers and learners in the country. He wants to know of that. Then we have, when are P7 candidates 2021 reporting to school? Okay. Good morning, Uganda. Why shouldn't the two ministries, Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education, vaccinate students and the teachers as soon as they report to their institutions? That is Robert Tumusime. Thank you, Robert Tumusime. We have, hello, my name is Solomon from Lila. My concern is most of the schools will tend to increase their fees, yet the number of days students and pupils spend in school is in this new normal is less than the days students used to stay in school before the pandemic. So my question is the Ministry of Education planning to restructure fees system or not? Let me also read another one here. Good morning, Dr. Mujimba. Regarding the new condensed curriculum being proposed, are the teachers being empowered or given knowledge, and what will be the modalities of assessment? That is Sergeant Bernard. Sergeant Bernard still has another message for you. Good morning, Dr. Mujimba. As we benchmark, I think there is need to have more recruitment of teachers across the public institutions to ease on the workload of the teachers and welfare of the teachers being prioritized, especially when the teachers contract the virus. Special treatment centers needed to be set up to manage health concerns of the teachers. Sergeant Bernard.
Okay.
Well, please keep them coming in. I'll have Doctor respond to some of these.
Okay, thank you so much, our listeners and viewers. Let me begin with Bernard. Now, regarding recruitment, we have planned, and government has set aside that budget to recruit about 6,000 primary school teachers we are recruiting or have already recruited at least 3,000 secondary school teachers. So we are moving on that front. And in addition, we are also opening new schools, especially secondary schools. So we shall be decongesting the current system. Now, on the new curriculum, Bernard has a point. What we are doing is that even as we are condensing, you know, curriculum is the one that guides or prescribes the learning delivery methodology as well as assessment. So the new, not the new, the curriculum modality we are putting in place, what we are calling the bridge curriculum, is going to prescribe the mode of assessment that we should use. We should not be assessing you like you've been exposed to 100% of curriculum content. So all these considerations are coming. Now the issue of school fees, this is why government is going to give us time. They are not going to ambush us and say reopen next week. No. They are going to give us time, and we need it as a sector. First of all, to consult the private sector, to consult the stakeholders and say, how do we go about ABCD? And one of them is school fees. So we shall give directions on that one when we reach there. Regarding P7 and candidates, the reporting of the candidate classes, we shall be guided by the dates that His Excellency the President is going to communicate. As soon as he communicates them, we shall get on the drawing board and readjust our detailed curriculum, detailed school calendar. Remember I told you last time that our minister had proposed reopening in October. But then, due to other realities that came in after wider consultation, we were told, no, October is too soon, wait a minute. So we already have a template of a school calendar. We are simply going to tweak it once the president announces the new dates for reopening. And even including selection. There will be selection for senior ones, there will be selection for senior fives, and there will be selection for higher education institutions as well, to ensure that we get people into the first years. Now, the statistics that we are talking about, there was a study, not a study, but part of the routine collection of information for the sector. We did this in 2019. So we have the latest statistics that we are talking about. These learners and whatever, NPA is getting from what UBOS collected, and UBOS is our source of government data. So these statistics we are giving are authentic. We estimate to be having 550,000 teachers, of which we vaccinated. By last week, we had vaccinated 43%. We think this number is higher than that. It may be close or just above 50%, because the data from up country usually takes a little bit of time to trickle in. Then isn't reopening going to find no teachers because of attrition? Yes and no. One, for the private sector, they've really been affected so badly by this pandemic, because it hit into their savings, and some of them could not sustain paying these teachers on payroll for more than 6 months from March 2020. So that is a tough one. And Robert, to tell you the truth, some of this reality shall be appreciated once we have reopened. Right now, for the private sector, we are speculating on how many are there, how many are not. But once we reopen, we shall know the real picture. But for government, we have been paying all our teachers on time, and we've not missed a salary for them. So it would be surprising if some of them left the profession, because they've been earning.
But you've not been monitoring what they have been doing. They could be earning and have dived into maybe greener pastures than what they were.
We were not expecting them, of course, to go to school and teach. But one of the expectations was, especially for head teachers, we distributed learning materials, home study materials. So we expected these head teachers to distribute these materials to the learners by inviting parents to come to the schools and collect these materials. So that's I think something that we need to look at, especially how many teachers do we still have on board once we have reopened.
Well, there is another message that came in asking that, Doctor, international schools are opened. Open and running. Yes. Why?
Okay, let's make this clear. And thank you so much, our viewer, for bringing that one up. Robert, and thank you for this opportunity to make this clarification again. The international students are not open. The classes that are open are finalists who are sitting exams in the window of August to October. They asked for permission, just like we also had our P7, Senior 4 and Senior 6 return to school for final exams. Now, international schools use a different calendar because they have a different curriculum. Now, it is your curriculum that sets your final examination cycle. So now what some people have been seeing is seeing you take your student to an international school who is a finalist to sit their exams. Now, when they saw you drop your child, they thought that school was reopened. But they are not reopened for all students. It is only for the finalist classes. And what I understand, our permanent secretary has instructed our
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Getting GoTV was the best decision James has ever made. Finding a good place to watch football was never easy, but it was costly until James discovered something big. Now he can finally enjoy the benefits of homegrown advantage with a decoder and 1 month of GoTV value. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cap competitions. GoTV Uganda, love it.
Five for five, 5 times the winning, yeah. 5 times the happiness, yeah. 5 times the luckiness, yeah. 5 for 5, oh yeah. It's 5 for 5. 5 for 5, 5 times the money, yeah. 5 times the shopping, yeah. 5 times the prizes, yeah. 5 for 5, oh yeah. It's 5 for 5. 5 for 5.
Win 100,000 Uganda shillings weekly in the 5 for 5 jackpot. Simply download the Center mobile app. Click Center on the go to open your account online. Transact 5 times or more using Center mobile, Center Visa, and Center agent to stand a chance to win. The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. So, participate in the 5 for 5 jackpot and win millions in daily and weekly prizes. The 5 for 5 jackpot is brought to you by Centenary Bank. Our bank, Centenary Bank, is regulated by the Bank of Uganda. Customer deposits are protected by the Deposit Protection Fund.
Nature that nurtures our life on Earth determines the geographical surrounding that should be protected and preserved by the community.
This is the time we partner with UBC and protect the environment.
Our environment is a program that will showcase the importance of human responsibility in a healthy environment, that is to say, conservation, waste management and recycling, disease prevention, biogas to mention but a few.
Support the program Our Environment on UBC.
Inspiring Uganda.
It's no secret that ICT makes learning easy.
The strides made in our field could not be possible without it.
And now we can watch our favorite shows.
My radio is my best friend.
UCC provides an enabling regulatory environment and policy guidance for healthy competition. We also facilitate ease of doing business in the communications sector through licensing, standardization, spectrum management, tariff regulation, rural communication development, and consumer empowerment. An informed consumer is an empowered consumer. UCC supports local content and innovations. Driving the development of a robust communication sector in Uganda is Uganda Communications Commission.
to you by
GoTV Valley. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cap competitions. GoTV Uganda, love it. Getting GoTV was the best decision James has ever made. Finding a good place to watch football was never easy, but it was costly until James